As believers, we want to live according to sound doctrine. But what does that look like, and what does that mean on a practical level? Stay tuned to From the Desk to find out. Hi, I'm Pastor Zach, and you're watching From the Desk from First Evangelical Free Church. It's been a minute since we've been in our From the Desk series here on the book of Titus, but it's good to be back with you. A couple weeks ago, we looked at Titus chapter 2 and the first 10 verses there. And in those first 10 verses, it starts out by saying that we should live according to sound doctrine. And then it gives us a whole list of things that we should be doing that would be living in accordance with sound doctrine. And those can be somewhat summed up by three things. We're supposed to be above reproach, we're supposed to be self-controlled, and we're supposed to be loving, all of which is to bring glory to the name of Jesus Christ. And as we saw throughout that passage, it didn't matter what your role or status was. All of them said that you were supposed to live in these ways. You're supposed to live godly lives. It doesn't matter if you're a slave or a master, a husband or a wife, whether you're male or female. All of those different roles had a different area where we were supposed to be living in a way that brings honor and glory to the name of Jesus. In today's world, often you find people going, just how far can I push that line? What is the point where I'm no longer living a godly life? Just like young children who are constantly testing their parents to find out just where that line is, many times Christians want to find out what that area where they're living in a way that they want to and yet still is godly. Alistair Begg is a preacher who used an excellent illustration. There's a particular path that is right on the ridge of a mountain line. On one end, it's a fall off that's quite steep, and on the other end is another fall off. So you're really walking along this path that is narrow and is tight, but is, of course, the only safe way to go. On one end, you have licentiousness, and on the other end, you have legalism. Now, we don't often talk about these terms. They're not words that are in our normal vocabulary for the most part. Some of us may have some idea of what legalism is, but not licentiousness. Legalism in this context says that I'm going to have a bunch of rules, a bunch of guidelines, that as long as I follow them, I know that I am being righteous. And if you're not following them, and I can see that, then I know you're not being righteous. In a lot of ways, this flies in the face of sound doctrine, because if we look at passages like Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, where it says it's through grace and not by any work that we've been able to do, so that no one can boast that we are declared righteous. If we could come up with a system that said this is how you live life that is godly, and that's how we could earn righteousness, then we take the work of the cross completely out of it. As Paul writes in Romans 11, verse 6, it's by grace that we're saved and not by works, because if it was by works, it would not be grace. If we could do anything that could declare ourselves righteous before God, we would have eliminated the entire need of the cross, which is why it's so important that we remember that there's nothing that we can do either to make ourselves righteous or to remove the work of the cross in our lives. Many of you will remember that grace is unmerited favor, and unmerited means that there's nothing that we can do to possibly earn that favor. God gave it to us as a free gift. That's what grace is. And the only way we can live lives that are according to sound doctrine and godly and holy is if we are living them in a way that's been transformed by the grace of God. The other end of that pathway illustration is licentiousness. Another word for licentiousness would be lawlessness. Those that have fallen on that side of the cliff are living lives that have no relation to God's law at all. Because God has saved me despite of my works, I don't really need to change my works. Of course, Paul addresses this in Romans as well. In Romans 6:1, he says, should we continue sinning so that grace could abound? And in very strong language, he says, by no means. We're sitting here and we're saying, hey, we should live however we want because we know God's grace covers it all. Paul says that is completely contrary to living lives that are changed by the gospel. We are to live lives according to sound doctrine, which means living according to the principles that we saw laid out there in Titus chapter 2. We're supposed to proclaim the grace of God. We're supposed to proclaim the good news. And that good news is that we are no longer like the Cretans that were around us. We have been transformed into a new person who is an heir with Christ. Living in a way that displays God's grace and displays how we have been changed is a testimony for the power of the gospel. And if we are living in ways that are not consistent with sound doctrine, in other words, not consistent of the things that we see here in chapter 2, then we're actually causing harm to the gospel. We're causing harm to the person, works, and teachings of Jesus Christ. So we should do our best to try to live lives that honor God. Because as Scripture has also said, we are ambassadors for the truth. We are ambassadors for Christ in a world that desperately needs it. This is the first of 2 videos you're going to get this week from the Desk. Stay tuned. Later on, you'll get the rest of chapter 2 that Pastor Rob preached on. Thank you for being a subscriber and for watching and liking this video, and we'll see you right here next time on From the Desk.